So my first job was hacking into banks, telcos, government systems, walking up to a bank and convincing them to let you in. I'm in your bank vault. You guys failed. I could shut off internet services to half your country. When you're in a hotel, they will go into the room. They will unscrew your laptop and copy your hard drive. Here's hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Go find the problems.
And your story begins as what they call a white hat hacker, is that right? And how old do you have to be to get into white hat hacking, Michael?
Well, how old do you have to be?
Well, no, do you have to be? How old were you, I guess? Is what
I mean, what's amazing is you see high schoolers and younger becoming hackers. Whether or not they're legal and gray hat or white hat, I mean, that's a different story. But like the curiosity for technology happens at a young age, which is what happened for me.
Yeah.
Like an interest in how computers work. Let's pick it apart. Let's make it do what I want. But I found my first job out of college was into this role. And I knew in college that I wanted to do this. I was a computer science major at University of Illinois, a really strong school that I enjoyed. But I found out from a friend who was doing an internship for the NSA that there was a profession in security. And I'm like, oh, this is wild. I've been reading about it. I've been studying. I didn't know what I could do without getting arrested. And he gave me a little bit of pointers. I did a little bit of work in my university lab, authorized, and then put all of my effort into finding that first job. And so my first job was hacking into banks, telcos, government systems, at their approval. But my goal was to find the vulnerabilities that they didn't know exist and show them for real. This is what an attacker would do. And so when I was sitting in the boardroom with, C-level executives, and I'm 21 years old, they would say, well, this isn't real. You're making it up. That's not possible. I'm like, not only is it real, I did it. I will show you. Here are the files from your machine. Here's your user data. Here's how I got in. And that was the beginning, of my long career here in cybersecurity.
Listen, I don't want to seem cynical, right? But in a movie, if they got like a bank robbery in the film, and they've got somebody who's like who knows about bank robberies, who's protecting the bank, they used to be a bank robber. They were never just a white hat bank robber expert, was there? I got it for you. You don't have to confirm or deny it. Every white hat hacker started out as a genuine hacker.
It was the coolest thing as a college student that I signed my offer letter, and they sent me in the mail the movie Catch Me If You Can. And
oh, did they?
And
that's
the book,
so cool.
Which is based
Ocean's
on Frank
11.
Abagnale.
Oh,
yeah. And so like, this is your job. And the other component of it was in person, like social engineering, walking up to a bank with a construction vest or a load of flowers or baked goods and convincing them to let you in. And then you would eventually call the contact like, hey, I'm in your bank vault. You guys failed. Here's some pointers for next time.
How many of those jobs what does your I don't know, how many a year do you, how many brick and mortar banks are you infiltrating?
The cool thing about it was at the time, at least, it was high churn. Like we had a new customer every week. So I'm doing like 40 or 50 of these a year.
That's amazing. And would you be able to pick your outfits and costumes and approach for the in-person bit? It's completely up to you. You just have to get inside the bank, probably in a certain part of it, I presume.
Yeah, completely up to us. Our creativity, we shared notes and tips and tricks, but I came up with new ploys that would work sometimes better than others. And it was wild. So
you're kind of a state sanctioned or like officially sanctioned criminal? I mean, like in a way, like in a nice way. I don't know.
All the cool things about being a criminal without the bad things of getting arrested.
without the guilt.
I'm helping them. I'm helping them. I'm a good guy.
And sometimes without the lucrative returns, perhaps as well.
It works out.
Perhaps. I don't know. Did you even finish your degree? Like, did you need to? Yeah. You finished your degree.
Yeah, definitely. I did an undergrad in computer science and went back and did a master's in computer security.
Okay. And then you're like early 20s. A qualified bank robber, ready to go. What was the next step in the career then?
Yeah, I spent some time inside a big corporation, Motorola, before they split. So 130,000 people in the company. And I was looking at the challenge of how do you defend a corporation inside the security operations center? What does it mean to have hundreds of thousands of attacks and intrusion attempts every single day? How do you start to proceduralize defending against that, finding the malicious actors? So that was humbling to see all that data. And then shortly after that, I was at another consulting firm, again, back into breaking into systems, only at the application layer at code. And then I found my way out to Silicon Valley.
What years were you at Motorola, sorry?
That was 2006 and seven, I believe.
What were the main sources of threat around that time?
One of the interesting things I was working on, well, that was back when the Razor was big. Now we're really dating ourselves way back there. But they were working on WiMAX networking and telephony, basically. So systems, how do you secure this new telephony style architecture from attacks? And that was another fascinating deep dive into new technology, new risks. I'll tell you an interesting story, though. One of the things I was tasked with when I was there was testing the security of a telco network in Southeast Asia. And this, again, is like 2006, 2007. I'm sitting in an office in Chicago, and I'm using an international data call tethered to a phone. I've got my laptop connected to this, again, 20-something years ago. Through that, I map out the telco's network in Southeast Asia, gain access to remote administrator screens, take control of core networking gear. And I tell them, hey guys, again, you failed. I could shut off internet services to, half your country here from Chicago. Just another wild thing of what was possible and real. It still is today, but humbling to see it.
Do you think some people will come through the kind of education and background that you did and go the other route, and they'll, and they'll become high end hackers, properly speaking? Yeah. Did you get the sense that? Do you think they have the hacker has an advantage over the defender? Would you agree with that in principle? Yeah, but there's a disproportionate kind of power dynamic here.
Yeah.
Right?
Those that learn how to hack, either from their own training or from education, there's definitely a black market, and it is a robust black market. It's an entire business enterprise where each piece has been modularized, and there's payment structures, there's helplines. You can buy crime kits to deploy malware and call the 1-800 number if you get confused on how to use it. And there's high-end bounties if you find vulnerabilities in core software. You could sell it to third-party brokers, to nation states. There's a whole space there. And to your point about the advantage of the attackers, you're right. The attackers only have to find the one employee that makes a mistake, the one vulnerability, whereas the defenders have to defend every possible path in, and that's really challenging.
Like you kind of imagine you imagine a soccer goal, like one person in an enormous goal, and kind of 500 balls kind of
totally right.
Kicked at him. Okay, one more stupid question. Sorry. Do you all drink at the same bars? I imagine, like you all come together, take the hats off, and you're like, okay, we're all hackers here.
We have a lot of conferences where we do all converge.
Do you?
Yep.
Do you know? Totally right. You can tell from if it's a white hat or a black hat. Got it. Or everyone should have to wear the hats. Maybe I don't know. So you go into the Motorola, and you're suddenly confronted with, how many hundreds of thousands of threats a day?
Oh yeah, I mean, the number of attacks and probes was huge, and you can debate the validity of different attacks, but there was a lot of potential malicious information coming your way that you had to sift through to find the real attacks versus the noise.
And given the amount of ill intent out there, given the amount of threat, and given the talent of some of your I don't know what to call them, adversaries, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we don't see more disruption? Because it almost sounds to me like there's a level of, certainly from the outside of organization, there's a level of seeming tranquility, which doesn't seem to align with the level of threat and risk that you describe.
Some of it is we've become numb to it, like the compromise of user data. It just happens again and again. When you get your 7th free credit monitoring service because you had another data breach with your information, you sort of don't pay attention. Another piece of it is it's a tax that is applied across everything. Like with intellectual property theft, that's happening, and that's happening regularly. And you see that you don't see it, I guess is the point, in economics. Like the competitors get slightly better. You have to spend slightly more. All of those things start to come out. The other side of it is, and this is a bit of a darker view, is the systems don't go down because the bad guys make more money when they work.
Yeah. You don't. Yeah, you're not in the business of destruction. Right. You're in the business of exploitation of vulnerabilities.
And so they're taking their slice of the pie, and everything keeps going. And
sure. Makes sense. And so is it after? You said this already, but after Motorola, you then moved to the Bay Area. Was that you made?
Yeah, I had a few years in a firm that focused on code level security, and so that's where I was doing audits for like the Federal Reserve. I was doing top secret work, which let me tell you, that's a trip when you are, hey, neighbors that I haven't talked to in 25 years, someone's going to knock on your door and ask questions about me to get clearance. But then, yes, I came out to Silicon Valley.
And sorry, I want to pause there because I've seen the James Bond movie. Which one is where they try and rob the Federal Reserve?
That's a good question. But yeah, no, yeah, the Federal Reserve, I was auditing their code and finding vulnerabilities in the software. So whereas before I was breaking into banks in their entirety, then I specialized for a few years just in software vulnerabilities. A bank would say, here's all of our code for the web application. What can you find in a week's time? And I'll tell you, the very first week, I was browsing through this website they were working on, and I found the ability to submit a mortgage application. That's not surprising. So you submit your mortgage application. Then at the very end, there's this little button that says, would you like to submit another application? Which, first of all, is a weird flow. Like, who submits multiple mortgage apps? But I'm like, sure. Now, while I'm doing this, I have other software monitoring all of the communication coming from my browser to their website. And that's where the vulnerabilities start to flow, the things that the developer doesn't realize you can see. And I see a little hidden parameter with an ID in it. I'm like, oh, what's this ID? And so I change that ID to a different number, decrement it by 1. I get back to my main profile page. I hit see past submissions. I am the previous customer. I'm no longer me. And I can view their entire mortgage app. And I decrement that number again. I can see the other customer. The very first week I find this vulnerability, I can see every single customer's mortgage application, their entire credit and life history. And that type of issue we found week over week.
What was giving you sort of passion and satisfaction in your work around then? I'm sure there's a lot of like financial opportunity, but there's some fascination comes off you when you describe these vulnerabilities and these infrastructures. And talk to me about that and the motivation level.
It's an academic and practical. It's a challenge. Yeah. It's a puzzle. Like, here is a system that you have never seen before, written in a programming language you might never have seen before. And here's hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Go find the problems. And I remember every week I'm like, oh, I'm going to fail. What am I going to do? And then I actually reminded myself, I feel this way at the beginning of every engagement, and I figure it out. And then sure enough you do. And then you start poking and prodding, like, well, that doesn't do what you would think it would do. And you keep digging and digging. So it's this puzzle and this challenge. And that's what drives you. And I remember sitting down in front of a fresh application, and you just have this energy coming, like you can't wait. There's so much potential there of where to find the different holes to go down.
Soul of the CIO is sponsored by Nextvink. Now, if you work in IT, you'll know too well how disruptions can derail productivity fast. Nextvink's AI-powered platform for digital employee experience keeps you ahead. It uncovers issues others can't see and resolves them automatically with employee-centric AI and always-on automation. Employees stay productive, IT stays proactive and even preventative, and leadership sees results. Nextvink, ahead of every IT disruption, behind every strategy. Learn more at nextvink.com.
So you move out to San Francisco. I got it right this time. That's what I was going for.
Okay, there you go. There we go. Yep,
but, there we go. And it's so interesting because, we've been here this week. We've been talking to loads of people with deep roots in the area, with connections to some of the legends of Silicon Valley. And we've been hearing amazing stories. And so always interested in finding out about your experience of the culture here, maybe from a sort of security specific perspective, and the opportunity that was here for somebody with your talents and your vision. What was your arrival here like on a professional level like?
Yeah, I made the move to join Mozilla. And Mozilla was and is the maker of Firefox. And at the time, that was 2010, that was in the height of the browser wars. Firefox came to be as an alternative to, Internet Explorer, giving users choice and control over their, online presence and browsing experience. And that was a pretty exciting opportunity. Come to Mozilla, start the web security program to protect their websites using all that code security knowledge that I had. And again, I wanted to take that challenge of how do you flip the script and become the defender? And become the defender for something as big as Firefox with over 500 million users. But coming out to Silicon Valley was sort of everything you would expect and imagine. I grew up in the Midwest, Cincinnati, then Chicago. But Silicon Valley, where every billboard is the latest and greatest technology, and all of these different, startups are everywhere, and you see different things on the street from nowadays, the robotic scooters and electric bikes and electric cars. And starting in Mountain View, right in the thick of where Silicon Valley took place, was really powerful. And I remember in one of the first weeks at Mozilla, I was talking to the CTO, Brendan Eich, and maybe at the moment or thereafter, I was talking to someone else. I'm like, wait a minute. So he's the one that created JavaScript, like this core programming language that everybody uses. And I'd seen many, many times.
Sure.
This was a creator in front of me, and he just works with me and is grabbing, coffee in the fancy coffee bar we've got in the office. And that was cool. That was very cool. And that was a thing that played again over and over is the most brilliant people are here doing the hardest things they can think about. Some of those are experiments that are silly, as some of the startups are, and some of them are just totally earth-changing.
And talk to me a little more about the threat landscape at Mozilla at that point. Like, how big was the challenge, and what means did you have to try and achieve your targets?
The interesting thing about Mozilla was it was an open source corporation. So it was a corporation fully owned by a nonprofit, all of it called Mozilla. But the contributor base was, the code was open. And so there were non-employees contributing the code. And so it was like work from home, work on your own device, BYOD, before that was a thing we had to think about. And so you had to secure everything, but you also didn't have authority over a lot of it. Like you can't tell people what to do with their home laptop. You could guide them. And then when you think about the user base, 500 million users, and you think about back to these adversaries we're talking about. So there would be individuals looking for vulnerabilities in Firefox that they could sell to governments, and those governments would use those vulnerabilities to compromise people they didn't like dissidents, free speech activists all around the world. So we had to think about not just a security vulnerability as something that's not ideal or something we should fix, but as something that put people's lives at risk around the world, depending on who they might be.
That's so interesting. So talk to me about the mechanism here. So let's say you're a government and you have a certain kind of stipulated number of opponents to your political will or whatnot. You would go to hackers with this list? They would, what's the dynamic look like, and what kind of information is being submitted, and how often does this become manifest? Like, is this happen all beneath the surface, or?
Yeah, so there's an entire black market, and you basically have brokers. The brokers buy the exploits for the vulnerabilities. So think of the exploits as modern day munitions, and the hackers are the ones that are finding the flaws and vulnerabilities in software, figuring out the specific code that exploits it. And then they give this basically weaponized version, this version that can be used by an adversary. So then the nation state, or the intelligence services at the nation state, will contact these brokers, offer them huge sums of money if they can give them exploits in particular pieces of software. Then they use that weaponized exploit code to go after their targets. And then they backdoor their device, maintain an ability to listen, to track them, to steal their data, to plant evidence, whatever they want to do.
Right. And what countries would you commonly kind of encounter involved in this kind of work?
So in general,
just assume I'm only asking you about things you can talk about.
in general, if you look at the global playing field, countries that have less freedoms than ours often go after anyone that is speaking out against them. So you can think of several Middle Eastern countries, several countries across Asia, and they are the main individuals cracking down on dissidents, in their eyes. Dissidents.
I was going to say probably people in their own citizens who are dissidents. Yep. Yeah. And I assume for nation states targeting one another as well, be them rogue states or Western ones. No, there's obviously a huge market for this kind of digital espionage. Tell us a bit about an overview of that, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, everything from intellectual property theft, which is something we dealt with at Motorola. Folks in my team would identify internal individuals that were stealing data, and several of them were arrested and prosecuted. And that there's some news stories out there about that time in Motorola. And then, yes, countries will definitely use this modern day warfare against each other. It's modern day tradecraft for spying and information gathering. Of how can you compromise other corporations or other government entities and agencies?
How many, like, anyone who works at a corporation, things seem to be pretty above board. I mean, how many corporations are going after each other in this way? Seriously, like,
U.S. based corp versus corp is not as common.
Yeah.
There was a recent story that just made the news, and the name is eluding me, but that one was one of the first that we've seen in recent times.
but it was US corp plus corp. Yeah.
Yep. And then from other countries against the U.S. is quite common. I mean, China is known for attacking U.S. corporations for intellectual property theft. That's very common.
Sure. And I guess the lines between a Chinese corporation and Chinese state, for instance, kind of probably become quite blurred.
Very.
It becomes a question of national interest, ostensibly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how long were you at Mozilla?
Just under 4 years.
Just under 4 years.
Yeah. I left that to explore startups.
Okay.
I was at an amazing startup for a year called Shape Security. They were tackling the challenge of defending applications against automated bot attacks. So if you run a marketplace, if you run a ticket sales, anything online, how do you determine if it's a human or a bot coming to your website? If you put your tickets on sale and they're all gone within 3 seconds, is that good? Like, well, I mean, from one lens, yeah, you sold out your tickets.
Yeah.
From another lens, your customers got 0 tickets and the bots did, and then the secondary market, et cetera, et cetera. So I stayed there for a year. Very fascinating company. Only reason I left was because Twitter came knocking and asked, they wanted to hire their first chief information security officer.
Wow, amazing. And were you already a chief information security officer at Mozilla at that point? Sorry.
So yeah, at Mozilla, I started leading web security, and then I took over all of security. So I was head of security for about 3 years there, and oversaw all of the web security, the corporate internet, internal security, the Firefox OS, the Firefox browser. So I had this experience at a high-tech firm leading all the challenges of security. And so that was appealing to Twitter.
Amazing. What year are we talking about now?
Twitter was 2014 to 18.
And give us a picture of I mean, obviously it's a significant moment if they're deciding for the first time to hire a CISO, but where was Twitter in its evolution, in its history at that point when they bring you on board?
So it had been public for a few years. There were 5,500 people, so pretty good size. And that was during the first Trump presidency was during that time,
Right.
kind of setting the stage and maybe reminding people of his use of Twitter at the time.
Yes.
Arab Spring had just happened a little bit before that, where Twitter was a pivotal moment to bring visibility to those efforts. And I remember when I was joining Twitter, some people would say, well, that's interesting. You're concerned about cybersecurity. Why Twitter? Like, that's where I go to tell people I'm making a ham sandwich. I'm like, yes, that is what some people use it for. And then other people, are pseudo-anonymous whistleblowers in the world, bringing attention to, egregious atrocities that need visibility. Those are the types of people that we're protecting.
And what kind of what did Twitter see as its responsibility towards those people, and how did it go about identifying who it wanted to protect and who it was responsible for protecting?
That's very interesting, because a large percentage of the DNA was, and rightfully so, just focused on the exciting, positive, oh, look at this soccer game that just got tweeted about, and look at this person and this celebrity. And so they got to think about all of that stuff. Which was great. And then as a security team, we reminded them, yes, that is part of the use, and here's the other use. And so we had to apply our security controls, across the board. We had to protect all of the user data in our servers. We had to give all of the users the ability to secure their accounts to the right level for them, the right amount of friction, and trade-off of security. And that became challenging.
I was going to say, and how do you translate that ethical responsibility into your responsibility as a software company operative in other states, right? Because you must have obligation to comply with foreign laws. How did you square that circle? I suppose as an approach.
From a protection of user data, that was universal. Like every country would support us in doing a good job in protecting the data. From a perspective of what data gets handed to what government, that became very challenging. If there are legal inquiries as to, we want data on this user, they committed a crime, We want to unmask them because they're anonymous on your platform. And we had an entire trust and safety and legal team that would field those requests and then have a transparency report that we published that would say, how many times did we get these inquiries from what governments? How many times did we comply? We obviously couldn't say the details of what it was, but showing people that this is not a black box that we just turn over user data to any government that asks for it. We have strict rules and pushback. And we would take countries to court routinely, including the U.S. government, to not give up user data.
When you mentioned the Arab Spring, and it wasn't just in the Middle East where you had various kind of political movements which seemed to be sparked by or organized around social media platforms. What was the in-house approach to this phenomenon as it was taking place, right, around the world effectively? Was it something you saw as a corporate responsibility to encourage in certain circumstances? Was it just a question of protect users to a certain degree of anonymity? What was the philosophical approach to this very kind of present phenomenon at the time?
We had something every week called Tea Time, where Jack Dorsey, who became the CEO for the second time while I was there, would get up and would talk about the state of the company. It was called Tea Time because at the very beginning, they would literally have tea. As we got to thousands of people, they did.
This is before tea meant gossip, I think.
Yes,
right?
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah, maybe they started that.
Maybe so. Yeah.
And they would highlight different uses of the platform around the world. Here's how users, individuals around the world are using Twitter. And so I think it was viewed as a tool to facilitate conversation. And past that, we didn't have an opinion on what that conversation was within the bounds of reasonable, safe, non-harassment. And that's where that got very tricky. Where do you draw the line on what is harassing somebody versus just saying something that's true? And that's where most of the criticism comes of Twitter is were you happy with where that line is drawn? And the trust and safety team worked tirelessly to publish what rules they were following and, to the best of how they were doing about that. But at a global perspective, it was, let's create a platform, let's let people share the realities and let the conversation flow from there.
It's probably difficult to think of a much more contentious moment in any tech company's history than Twitter in the 2010s, maybe, right? And what was leadership's and your role put you right in the center of that kind of whirlwind. What was the outlook of someone like Jack Dorsey at that time? How closely did you work with leadership, and what kind of a steer did you get, and level of engagement with what your responsibility was?
Yeah. It was interesting being their first CISO because when I started, the role was nestled deep in infrastructure engineering where the security people had been. And as I started there, I started to take stock on the reality of risks, of challenges, of opportunities. And the first thing I did was made the case of, well, if you want cybersecurity for the whole company, if you want a CISO to think about these things, you need to give them a little bit more power than nestled deep in this team. And after a few months, not too long, I was reporting to Jack. So for the vast majority of my time there, Jack was my direct boss. And what was nice about this was, Jack is an interesting character. He was running two public companies. He was the CEO of Square at the time also. What was good was he knew what he had to do, which was come in, empower leadership, share what needed to be shared, get the feedback on what needed to be heard, and then enable those leaders to go and make decisions and act. And I think that was done. I think that was done well. We had a lot of interesting challenges, both in shipping product and making innovations, and then on the flip side, dealing with every country in the world having different opinions on what we were doing, having those legal inquiries, having tax raids, which is when they enter the office to do a tax audit. I'm going to put this up here. And what do you think about then to protect user data in those situations? To actual malicious insiders that are stealing data on behalf of on behalf of foreign nations.
So much to go into.
This is the life.
Hang on, I got to reel it back. Okay, let's start with tax audit. Sorry, you're talking about which offices are being raided by whom?
Yeah.
Under this auspice, as I assume?
So this is a reality all corporations have to think about, some just less than others, where depending on where your physical offices are in the world, the local government may raid that office. They'll call it a tax audit, but they want to come in, they want to look around, they want to raise some pain. And the question then we have to think about as security professionals is, if they are in this space, what do they have access to besides physical files? Do they have access to digital information? Do they have access to corporate servers? What do we do as a response plan to protect our core user data that the employees need access to do their jobs, but we can't give up? And we have this interesting predicament you may not think of is, well, you can't just tell the employees to say no because people have walked in the door with, machine guns, and these employees will go to jail, and that's not the right answer. So how do you construct a defensive plan that the employees cannot know they're obstructing, and also the access to the corporate servers get cut? And so that's the magic, is figuring out how to do that.
And foreign governments, I suppose, are seeing Twitter as an agent of American power, ideological power, state intent. I mean, how do you think it was perceived by these governments?
I don't know if I don't think they directly link it to U.S. government. I think they see it as a corporation that they can't control as much as they'd like to, especially compared to things they can control in their country. And so when a foreign company gives citizens a power and a right that they don't want them to have, that is contentious to them.
Yeah, and there must be knock-on effects. I think you alluded to it a minute ago for employees of the company when they go abroad and such like. What were the implications there for them, indeed for yourself?
Yeah, we had to think very carefully about what it meant to send employees into countries like China and Russia. China, as we said, known for intellectual property theft. Russia, known for their desire to unmask particular dissident users on the platform. And when you think about threats, not just from a cyber criminal element, but also from the intelligence services in these countries, you have to start to think about, well, when you're in a hotel, if you leave your hotel and leave your device in the hotel, they will go into the room. They will unscrew your laptop and copy your hard drive. They will modify it. And these are all things that were not theoretical. We verified through different means that it was happening. And so many companies create policies, and we did as well, where devices that go into China don't get reused when they come back out. They're sort of one-time use, and that's their only purpose.
Was this something to dictate your holiday plans, Michael? Were you like, okay, got a list of places and not too keen?
It did. There are certainly places in the world where I go and I feel like maybe I won't go there, or maybe I feel a little concerned if I do. Sure.
And of course, at the time, you've not only got this sort of international tensions, you've already alluded to this, that you had Twitter was at the sort of center of a sort of national political crisis, perhaps would be fair to say, through the first Trump presidency, through the way Trump was using the platform, for the culture war that was taking place very viscerally on the platform. What were the implications of all this activity or this context for the role of for the area of security at Twitter?
One of the challenges we thought about, because high-profile accounts on Twitter would get hacked from time to time. And when that happened, it wasn't that Twitter got hacked. It was that the individual themselves got hacked and their credential for Twitter was stolen.
Yeah.
And so the nuance there is important and also not important.
If you've got a president, yeah, that's quite.
There it is.
That's an interesting thing.
Exactly, and that's it.
Yeah.
So we looked at these things and we thought to ourselves, wow, well, what are the implications if, candidate Trump at the time would be hacked, or even when he was president?
You wouldn't know.
Right. Well, that's one piece.
He's just having a bad afternoon,
Yes, that was one of the things we did think about was could we pre-screen all of the tweets, and I think not pre-screen to not let him say what he wanted to say, but of course not. But just to confirm it wasn't compromised, and that was kind of quickly dispelled because how would we know what he wanted to say? But what we worked on was saying we understand from all the other high-profile accounts when there were compromises what led to that and what amount of flexibility they may have had with sharing their account with other people or this or that. And so we basically enabled every security control possible, which restricted how the account worked. It was it was a little bit more rigid.
Like a kind of Twitter bat phone kind of situation.
Yeah. But as a result, we were able to protect that.
Yeah. And there were, and besides this, there were other, became it's quite well known that Trump had his account ultimately taken off him, and there must have been a sense of a cumulative buildup of tensions at the company and outside of the company that you were very aware of culturally or practically. I mean, talk to me about that.
Yeah, that was, I believe that was after I had left. So I don't know if I have the inside scoop on that one, but the question that would come up at all times for multiple leaders was, there are rules of the road of what's permitted on the platform and what's not. And we talked about that, and that's very challenging. And does that apply to everyone? And does the line move at all for anyone? And another discourse on that was, well, some things that some people say need to be heard regardless because they said it. Like, okay, that's one point of view. And on the other hand, some people said, but what they're saying is so egregious that it shouldn't be broadcast. And that's sort of where the tension came of where do you draw the line?
Of course. And let's check in on again on threat profile. So it's now 2014-ish. So are we earlier? Yeah. And how is that evolving in how's the size of the goal and the size of the goalkeeper? How's that changing?
Well, I guess one way of answering that, when I get there, I'm taking stock of the security program, of the team, of the programs we have, what we need to build. I'm building the security strategy. I'm making the case throughout the company why do we exist? Why are we asking you sometimes to do this, which is slowing you down slightly. And 6 months in, we have a nation state insider, an insider attacker that's stealing data from us to give to a nation state in the Middle East. And this is public, so that's Saudi Arabia. And this is sort of dropped on my desk, so to speak. Our 3-letter agencies alerts us that this is happening and says, good luck, go figure it out. And that was a shock. You're like, wow, this is, what do we do? I'm in the beginning of figuring out the program. I'm in the beginning of enhancing some of the technologies. We don't have everything I want to have. What do we do? I pull together some of the best guys we have, best team, go in the conference room and start digging. Like, well, what are the different paths to the data? What are the different logs? What do we have access to? How do we correlate that? All things that would later become more mature and easier and robust, but at the time was pretty challenging. And maybe it was messy, but we figured it out. We analyzed behavioral patterns, we analyzed logs, and we were able to identify an individual that had access for a particular reason that was overusing that access.
Yeah.
And many years later, as you'll see from the public records, that person was arrested and prosecuted.
Right. Interesting. Was it?
But
No.
it just makes it very real. When the FBI posts statistics on how I believe like 0.2% of employees are malicious, or somewhere in there, some number that's well below 1%. But do some math.
Sure,
with thousands of employees.
You've got 2,000 employees.
You're like, oh wait, well that's like 2 or 3. Like, well, how malicious are they? And so not every one of them is being leaned on by a foreign adversary, but sometimes they are.
And I guess the sort of nature of somewhere like Twitter is it sort of thrives on its agility as a company, right? And it thrives on the innovation of its employees. And this is where you maybe encounter the kind of the tensions that can exist between a CISO and a CIO, right? What was how provocative was the level of security that you were asking employees to kind of adopt and embrace, in terms of the company wanting to have its employees to have a certain degree of agility and a sense of freedom and creative expression? I mean, and how do you approach that dilemma in your role?
It's a really good question, because if you take the naive approach to security, you kind of come in with a big hammer and say, this will become secure because you won't be allowed to do what you want to do. But the modern day security leader, if they do their job well, is saying, this is the path that lets you do exactly what you want to do, and it is also secure. And that's the magic. That's weaving together what needs to get done for business speed and security. And it's a lot harder, don't get me wrong. But the way to do that as a cybersecurity leader is to be a advocate for the business and to be a good executive, meaning you understand the needs of all the different departments. You work with them. And that's what I did. In the first few weeks, I sat down with every business leader and I wanted to understand, what do you do? What is your North Star? What is success for you? What scares you? How's it been working with security? And then how can we align these things so you can get to your North Star, but I can also help you with the biggest security challenges that we see.
And have you had dynamics which have been surely outside of your own control, adversarial with be CTOs or CIOs, and what key advice would you give to people in your profession or CTOs or CIOs for finding that harmony or overcoming that kind of potential for an adversarial dynamic?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely did. And what I would say is that from a cybersecurity lens, you initially think that you need to prevent all bad security things from happening. And then you put everything on your shoulder. And then it becomes personal, then it becomes contentious. But you don't. That's not what you're there for. Your job is to surface the risks, let the company realize those risks and decide where the risk trade-off is. Because if you reduce all risk, like, you're not doing anything as a business. Now, how do you make that practical? I had a situation where one of the different engineering leaders didn't want to prioritize some of the work in their teams to protect their endpoints, some stuff that the team people had to do. It was going to take time. So instead of fighting that battle of why this was important, we surfaced the reality. We said, here's the scorecard of how everyone's doing. Here's where we want to be, and here's how each team is performing. And then suddenly that person was at the very bottom of the list by many orders of magnitude. The tone switched. That person was like, well, I don't actually know what this is, but I don't want to be last. And this seems reasonable. So, push down to the team. On the other hand, when you have even more existential risks to the company, you take it to the board level discussion and you have a scenario and you sort of say, here is something that could happen, X then Y then Z. How do you feel about that potential? And they're like, oh, well, wow, that can never happen. That would be disastrous. Like, well, it could happen today. Here's how. Here's the plan to fix it. Do we want to prioritize this with this cost and this trade-off? And so I think making it not personal, not emotional, but we have decisions to make on trade-offs. Let's put the facts on the table. Let's pick a path.
It must have been such a fascinating chapter in your career, and I'm loath to leave it and leave a stone unturned or leave something.
So many stones.
Come on, give me another stone, Michael. I'm overwhelmed by areas of conversation.
Oh man, there's too many more. There's too many more.
Okay. What happened next in your career, and why did you leave?
I left because the inkling in the back of my mind of one day starting a company, as one thinks about in the Silicon Valley, finally found the right recipe.
Yeah.
I found in my role as CISO, I'm like, wow, we have this gap. I really wish we could fill this with a solution. There doesn't seem to be anything. I talked to my CISO peers, like, yeah, we see it too. We have no idea what to do. And I set off with my then co-founder to start a company called Altitude Networks to focus on this challenge of how do you protect data inside of these cloud platforms like Google Drive, Microsoft 365, where anyone can change the permissions and share it to whomever they want, maybe even typo the email address and share it to their aunt or their personal Gmail account instead of the corporate account of their colleague. How do you wrap your head around that? And so I went off and started this company. We raised a few rounds of funding here in Silicon Valley, classic venture-backed startup. We built a team, built a product, and protected some really cool organizations, everything from the DNC to a major charitable organization to a huge movie studio, and found our way through that journey for about 4 years before we were acquired in 2022.
Movie studio. You reminded me of the North Korean movie hack of a few years
ago. Oh, yes. The Sony hack Seth Rogen film.
I knew a guy who worked there in the IT security.
Yeah, I know a guy that was hired after that to clean everything up around the world.
He was probably did better.
He was very busy for a very, very number of years.
Yeah. What other kind of so from thinking about some of that very interesting client list, what are maybe some threats that organizations like that face that we might not think of from the outside?
One of the things that was interesting was we found, actually back to our prior conversation, we found intellectual property theft. We found that in our proof of value, which was really helpful for making a sale. Let me show you how the product works. This guy's stealing your stuff. Like, okay, we'll buy it.
Before you know it, Spider-Man 6 has come out in China. And,
Because it was a new frontier. And this concept of, well, wait, all of the security has been inside the corporate network and protecting it. But now we have these cloud servers where people can just go and flip one switch and suddenly they can access it from their personal account. This is a problem. So we'd see people upload data into the cloud, add their personal account as a viewer, then go home and use their personal account to then download the files back to their personal machine. And so it sidestep all of the normal controls and normal considerations in an enterprise, but that would be how they would steal data.
Interesting. What was that transition like from the C-suite to being a startup, a founder, effectively? And where were the most distinct unexpected challenges and obstacles that you faced in that transition that you perhaps didn't expect? Or
it really made the trade-off consideration real, because you're building new software for a security use case for enterprises, and you know how it should be built securely. But then you're thinking about new features that advance the security case. But then on the other hand, as a startup, with X number of months of runway, you're thinking about sales targets and you're thinking about features that customers want to buy the product. And so it really brought it all to a head of like, how do you balance which one you do next? In my role, CEO of the company, was very product oriented, but also very sales and customer focused. And so I found myself out there talking to other CISOs, empathizing with their pain and sharing the story of what we did. And that's a new motion of, all right, let's pound the pavement. Let's get out there and talk to a whole bunch of people and tell them about this great product. But I do think that the trade-off consideration was one of the bigger ones. And then, as someone thinking about starting a company, it's such a wild experience. Like, I have so much empathy for founders. There's no way you can know what that's like until you go through it. Like every night going to sleep knowing, all right, we've got a dozen people that are counting on us to make this work, their jobs and livelihood. Like, we've got X number of months till we run out of money. We either make a bunch of sales or position ourselves for the next round of funding. And this is and then everything becomes your problem. Like, that's your job as a founder. Nobody else knows what to do. Your problem to figure out, from how do you get food service if you need it, to how do you do payroll, to let's close some contracts. Well, what does that mean? What do we need for legal? It's your problem.
And I guess the satisfactions maybe outweigh what can come to you if you're just an employee as well. But,
yep. I mean, it was very fulfilling. And just like before, it was a challenge where it's unclear how you're going to get from A to B, but we'll figure it out.
Let's think about the present a little bit. When you look at the sort of let's go back to the goal and goalie analogy. And where is it now? And particularly with you're seeing a lot of new technologies start to flood corporations and really transform them. And with it, I'm sure, new threats and with AI, new levels of threat sophistication. What's your analysis of that landscape? Particularly with a view to the CIO who might be watching or we speak to, and how should they be orientating themselves in this very, very new and threatening domain?
The biggest challenge that I'm seeing is the massive expansion of surface area and data movement. When we went from on-prem to cloud, that was the first big leap of things are leaving your sphere of control. Mm-hmm. Now they're in someone else's data center. They're in other servers and web apps all over the place. But now it's much, much bigger, just exponentially bigger. Like, we went through this brief little period of the huge BYOD, work from home, and those things haven't gone away, but they don't compare to where we are now with AI connecting everything, and the data is moving seamlessly. And the challenge you face is, if you stand in front of that train and say, whoa, we got to back up, guys. We can't do this. We're not sure. This isn't safe. How do we control it? You're going to get run over. Your employees are going to revolt. Or if you win that battle and you don't use the AI-powered everything, your competitors are going to eat your lunch. So you've got to figure out the way forward to say, what is it you need? We're going to find the way to give that to you in a safe path forward. And that's challenging, but that's where we need to face. We need to be AI native. We need to embrace these things. Just got to figure out the way to do it safely.
I guess there's a kind of an arms race between bad actors and defenders, right? Do you see that as ultimately resolving itself in an equilibrium, or is there potentially something in the nature of AI that could maybe create a radical disparity in power on one side or the other?
There's two parts to that. One, from the classic cybersecurity angle of all of these different attacks across the entire stack, from the operating system to the network to the web app. We've been losing that battle. No question. The attacker needs to find one vulnerability, one way in. We have to defend them all. What we've had is massive amounts of telemetry and data that we've tried to make sense out of. So AI can help us there. We can actually start to put all the puzzle pieces together, find the needles in the haystack. And I am hopeful of what AI will do to balance the field from a defender perspective. On the other hand, we have this encroaching elimination of trust. We can trust this because we're here. But everyone watching, this could all be totally fabricated.
Yeah.
And how do you think about that when in a corporation that now is embraced work from home, work from anywhere, that everything could be fake? Your text message could be fake. The phone call that says it's coming from Steve, well, that's fake because caller ID can be spoofed.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's Steve's voice. That's fake.
Are we all going to end up in the same room? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Like staring at each other. This is just the beginning of that. Yeah.
And there's real cases of this already. There was a wire transfer made from a company in Hong Kong a few months ago, where the individual was asked to make the transfer, and he said, "Hey."
It was a fairly hefty amount of money if it's for one I'm thinking of, right?
Yep.
It was,
And the guy's like, "Well, can we jump on a video just to make sure this is real?" And they jump on a video, and it's a deep fake of the CFO saying, "Yeah, let's go ahead and make the transfer."
It's a good movie.
There we go. And so ask your board members, if you get a video call from this other board member and they say, "Hey, let's do this," how are you going to decide if that's real?
You need a code word for a start. I mean, you can hire me for that. By the way. That's okay. I'm available.
So that's the side of AI that is challenging, the destruction of trust and what is real.
And I guess one thing you've got a deep experience in from entering Twitter at such a kind of pregnant moment is how to reorientate teams and around security and how to build in resilience to your organization. I mean, given this insane landscape you just described, how should technology leaders across the board start to think and approach security for the next 5 years?
The biggest thing is to not chase fires or headlines, because you will always find something that feels like it's urgent, and you can get distracted and do that ad nauseum. What you need to do is be methodical. You need to be risk-based. You need to have a rubric on how you think about things, because what will happen is you will have a long list of disaster scenarios and risks and things that should be fixed, and you have a cut line of where you can focus your time and attention. And the goal is to articulate that to your executive team and your board and say, here are the risks that we care about, not at the deep technical layer, but at the business impacting layer. And you have to do that translation. Here's where we're going to draw the line. We're going to fix these in this time period. And these, if they happen, they happen. And then the leadership team will say, that seems right. That feels right. Or they're going to say, well, that can't happen. Okay, no problem. I've got a budget and a plan for that one too. Just costs a little bit more money, a little bit more time. We can put that line wherever we want. But that's the trick, to be able to translate this chaos into an actionable plan that people can say, we've got our arms around this reality. We've got a plan. And the assumptions we made, we can revisit, but we're going to go forward. And we're not, and if a big flashy headline comes up, we're like, okay, that's one of the things we don't care about. We've evaluated that. That's not that big of a deal if it happens.
It must have been, just coming back to Twitter in a sort of retrospective context, it must have been very strange for you in, what was it, 2020, when Twitter was bought by Elon Musk? Was that 2020? And prior to that, it's arguably the most fractious and controversial corporation in the world, just the level of pressure and tension and discussion around it as a platform. I guess, first of all, you must have had a lot of sympathy knowing what the complexities look like from the inside. So prior to it being bought, what was your perception of how things had escalated and its role in the culture and its role in the culture wars with that?
I think, I don't know if too much had changed in my opinion, prior to being bought. When that transaction went through, I had trepidation about how Elon would take the helm. I thought that he was a little too glib on how trust and safety should be handled. It was almost any time if you start a sentence with just do this, you probably don't understand the depth of the problem.
Yes. You weren't impressed by him bringing the sink in to the office, no, or out of the office. I can't remember.
That's right. That's right. I was hopeful for his take on technology and how he might integrate, new product features and speed up releases. As it played out, I think we saw. I mean, the number of staff cut was surprising, and I'm surprised that it didn't go down more. Like many companies of that size, some extra weight that could get cut, but they cut really deep, and I was surprised that it kept working at all. Given that, so hard to know behind the scenes what's not working, but it stood up more or less. It was a very interesting transition, and I'm glad it's been renamed. It's a different company. It represents a different thing. It's got a different ethos to it now than it did, and that's fine. It's just different.
When you look sort of into, let's say, EUC or the CIO's broader remit from your very specific security perspective, what interests you most outside of your remit, and what trends do you see as having a special significance for technology and organizations over the next few years?
One thing that's really interesting is, back to AI, is enabling the non-engineer to be more powerful. So almost looking at this concept of vibe coding. I think whereas in the last several decades, the non-engineer was empowering themselves with Excel macros and using everything Excel could do. I think the next step of that is vibe coding technology solutions to their problems.
Yeah.
And that's wild. So what is the Zapier of your organization where you can drag and drop needs and create software as a worker in finance that doesn't have a computer science degree?
Yeah, it's going to be insane.
Yeah. That's really cool. And the empowerment there is huge. The risk of doing it poorly is also on the cybersecurity person's mind, but I think we can find the right answer there.
And we've spoken a lot about the threats to organizations, understandably. What about the threats to individuals, and what is the meaningful level of personal security you could aspire to or hope for that's also practical?
It's a really good question. And interestingly, when I have drinks with someone or meet them in a professional setting, I, one, talk about how I hacked into things. And then two, they're like, well, what should I do for me? And it's interesting because there's only so much you can control. But if you do most of these things, maybe you won't be perfectly secure. But what is that saying? You're not outrunning the bear, but you're outrunning your friend. So in terms of things you can do, one, use a password manager instead of trying to remember passwords. There's just no hope to remembering them. And the problem is not that you might come up with one great password, but then that website gets breached and there's automation from the bad guys to try your email address and that password everywhere. So one strong password doesn't matter. You need just individual passwords that you don't think about. So a password manager is one thing. Use two-factor. Specifically, if you can, use a two-factor, which is the physical token that plugs into your laptop. Ubico is a good manufacturer of those. The reason I say that is, one, it's easier to use. Instead of like getting a text message or getting a code on your phone and having to type it in, you just like push the thing. It's way easier to use. But what a lot of people don't realize is it's phishing resistant. So if I convinced you as a phisher to give me your password through a fake web page, you know what you're going to also do? Type your little code in there too. And then boom, you're hacked. It doesn't work with that type of physical token.
Nice, yeah.
And then the third thing is, every time your operating system or your browser bothers you for updates, apply the updates. If you don't patch your stuff, those vulnerabilities that the bad guys are buying and selling to the brokers, to the governments, you'll just go to any random website and there'll be malicious code there will compromise you. There's no dark web you have to worry about. You will just get compromised. So
some things never change, yeah?
Yeah.
Do your updates.
Yep.
Come on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are some of the biggest things. The other thing, I actually give a whole course to execs on personal cybersecurity. The other one that's a little bit outside the space is freeze your credit report. Like you don't need to have your credit open. So freeze it. So if somebody gets your personal data, they can't just open credit cards in your name. Sure, when you go to apply for a loan, you have to unfreeze it. It takes you 5 minutes, but it's worth it.
Good advice. Good advice. And what about you, Michael? What's your current and future focus all about?
The interesting thing about my background is I keep moving around cybersecurity from every angle. A hacker, a defender, a vendor, a CISO, a founder.
Time to become a criminal. It's time to give it a proper go. Huh?
That is the backup plan. A nice place in South America.
Bank robbery. Come on.
And so where I've ended, as some people do in Silicon Valley, is actually in venture capital. And not in the classic go join a random venture capital firm, but be a founder again and start my own venture capital firm and focus on exclusively cybersecurity. Yeah. And so I'm focused on the companies and the founders at the very beginning stages. This is two people and an idea. And I'm helping say, well, if you're going to take this idea off the ground, let's make sure it's the right problem to be solving. The CISO has all these problems. Remember the cut line.
Yeah.
Let's get something above the cut line. Let's leverage my background as a founder of what it means to scale a company. And let me help you at the very beginning stages. And so, with 7 Hill Ventures, I'm investing into pre-seed stage companies and helping defend corporations through the advancement of great new technology.